The champagne flute felt cool and fragile in my hand, a stark contrast to the simmering heat of my anger. Around me, the wedding reception swirled in a kaleidoscope of laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft melodies of a string quartet. My daughter, Chloe, was a vision of incandescent joy, her face glowing as she danced, the intricate lace of her gown catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. It was a perfect picture, a scene I had helped paint with a mother's love and a not insignificant portion of my fortune. And it was all about to shatter. I felt a presence beside me before I heard his voice. "Serena," he said, his tone low and urgent, cutting through the celebratory hum. "We need to talk. Privately." I turned to face Julian, my new son-in-law. His tuxedo was impeccably tailored, his smile perfectly calibrated, the same charming, disarming smile that had won over my daughter just 6 months ago. He looked every inch the besotted groom, but his eyes, usually so warm and attentive, held a new, unsettling glint. "Of course, Julian," I replied, my voice a mask of pleasant neutrality. "Is everything all right?" He led me away from the champagne fountain, steering us towards a secluded alcove near the terrace doors, shielded from the main ballroom by a large, ornamental fern. I assumed he wanted to offer a heartfelt thank you for the wedding, or perhaps discuss some last-minute honeymoon detail. The reality was far more grotesque. Once we were shrouded in relative privacy, he moved closer than was appropriate, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made my blood run cold. "I know about the beach house in the Hamptons, Serena. The one appraised at $3 million. I want you to sign it over to Chloe. Consider it our wedding gift." For a moment, the sheer audacity of the demand short-circuited my comprehension. I blinked, certain I had misheard him over the din of the party. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" His smile never wavered, but it transformed, turning predatory. "The beach house. I need you to transfer the deed. Ideally tonight, but certainly by Monday." A cold fury began to crystallize within me. "Julian, that house has been in my family for 4 generations. I can't just—" "You can and you will," he interrupted smoothly, his voice a silken threat. "Because if you don't, I will tell everyone, Chloe, all your friends, the entire society page, that you tried to seduce me. A poor, lonely, grieving widow, so desperate for affection, she made inappropriate advances toward her own daughter's fiancé. Can you imagine how devastated Chloe would be? The scandal would be insurmountable. The audacity of it stole my breath. This was his endgame. The charming courtship, the thoughtful gifts, the picture-perfect proposal. It was all an elaborate prelude to this moment of extortion. He believed he had me cornered, that I was just another wealthy widow, too terrified of scandal and too desperate to preserve my daughter's happiness to fight back. And that's when I started to laugh. It wasn't the polite, tinkling laugh I reserve for charity galas and boardroom pleasantries. This was a deep, genuine, and utterly delighted laughter that erupted from my core. I laughed until tears gathered in the corners of my eyes. Julian's confident smirk faltered and then dissolved into pure, unadulterated confusion. He had expected tears, protests, perhaps even begging. He had not expected to be the punchline of his own joke. "Did I say something funny?" he asked, his voice tight. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "You have no idea how hilarious this is. But before we continue this fascinating conversation, there's someone I really think you should meet." I gestured elegantly towards the bustling ballroom. "You see that woman over there? The one in the sapphire blue dress?" His gaze followed my pointing finger to where an elegant brunette stood, conversing easily with a small group of guests. She was stunning in an understated, powerful way, with sharp cheekbones and observant eyes that missed nothing. "Who is she?" Julian demanded, but a note of unease had crept into his voice. The first crack in his polished facade. "That," I said, my voice sweet as poison, "is Isabella Rossi, my special guest for this evening." I thought her presence was essential for such a momentous occasion. The color drained from Julian's face so rapidly, I thought he might collapse onto my imported Italian marble floor. His mouth opened and closed, soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. "Isabella," he finally whispered, the name a ghost on his lips. "What is she doing here?" "Oh, we'll get to that," I assured him. "But first, let me tell you a little story. This story begins not at the wedding, but 3 weeks prior, plagued by a persistent, gnawing insomnia. It wasn't the typical sleeplessness of menopause or stress. It was my intuition, screaming at me that the fairy tale romance my daughter had fallen into was a carefully constructed lie. Julian was too perfect, his history too vague, his integration into our lives too seamless. So, I did what any fiercely protective mother with considerable resources would do. I hired a private investigator. Lucas Gray came highly recommended, former FBI, current loan operator with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. We met in a quiet corner of a library, far from my usual circles. I want you to investigate my daughter's fiancé, Julian Reed, I told him, dispensing with pleasantries. I need to know everything. Lucas had regarded me with a patient, knowing look. Mrs. Thorne, are you certain? The truth isn't always what we want to hear. Mr. Gray, I'd replied, my voice firm. I am a widow worth $40 million, and my only child is about to marry a man who appeared out of thin air 6 months ago. I am absolutely certain. I want to know everything. And Lucas delivered. Julian Reed was not just a gold digger. He was a professional con artist of a particularly vile breed. His real name was Julian Rossi, and for the past 5 years, he had been working with a partner, executing elaborate long-term cons that targeted wealthy families through their daughters. His partner was Isabella Rossi. His wife. They had been married for 7 years. Their pattern was chillingly methodical. Julian would seduce the daughter, playing the role of the perfect, devoted partner. Isabella, the brilliant strategist, would meticulously research the family's finances, identifying the most vulnerable, transferable assets. Together, they would plan their approach, bleeding the family dry through gifts, investments, and eventually direct demands. The beach house wasn't a random target. Isabella had identified it as the most valuable single asset that could be cleanly transferred. But their perfect scheme had developed a fatal flaw, agreed. After their last con, targeting a senator's family, a move that broke their own rules and attracted federal attention, Julian had panicked. Instead of lying low with Isabella, she advised, he had double-crossed her. He'd emptied their shared accounts of nearly $500,000 and vanished, leaving her to face the escalating FBI investigation alone. He then immediately targeted my family, believing he could execute the con solo. Isabella was, understandably, livid. Her fury made my phone call to her 3 days ago one of the most satisfying conversations of my life. Ms. Rossi, I'd said when she answered, I believe we have a common problem. I think you have the wrong number, she'd replied, her voice carefully neutral, a professional to her core. Julian Rossi, also known as Julian Reed, also known as your husband, who stole $480,000 from you and left you to face federal charges alone, I stated calmly. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. When she finally spoke, her voice was stripped of its facade, sharp and cold. Who is this? Serena Thorne, mother of the woman Julian, is currently conning. The wedding is in 3 days. I think we can help each other. What followed was a masterclass in strategic negotiation. Isabella confirmed everything Lucas had uncovered. She was the architect, Julian the charming frontman. She outlined their methods, their rules Julian had shattered. She was tracking him, waiting for him to surface, but was shocked by his audacity and stupidity in moving so quickly. He's an idiot, she'd said, a bitter laugh in her voice. He thinks he can run this con without me. He has no idea of the legal complexities. Here is my proposal, I'd said. You want your money back in revenge for his betrayal. I want to protect my daughter from a predator. Be my guest at the wedding. When Julian makes his move, and he will, you will be there to help me expose him. And what do I get out of this? She'd asked, all business. I will ensure you receive every penny he stole from you, plus a $200,000 consulting fee for your assistance. Consider it a tax-free bonus. Another pause. You're serious? Ms. Rossi, my daughter's future is worth far more than $700,000. And having a front-row seat to Julian's downfall? That is priceless. Our alliance was forged in that moment. Over the next 2 weeks, Isabella became my consultant in Julian's psychology. She predicted his every move, his subtle manipulations. She explained how he would make Chloe feel like she was protecting him, fostering a sense of codependency. Sure enough, I began to notice the pattern. The offhand comments about cash flow problems, his pride preventing him from accepting help, which only made Chloe more insistent on paying for things. Isabella's intelligence was the key that unlocked his entire charade. Now, standing before a pale and trembling Julian, I felt an immense sense of satisfaction. Isabella looks wonderful tonight, doesn't she? I remarked conversationally. That sapphire blue is really her color. But then you'd know that better than I, after 7 years of marriage. His head snapped toward me, desperation replacing his earlier arrogance. Serena, I can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can, Julian, or should I call you Mr. Rossi? You're quite the storyteller. But why don't we let Isabella do the talking tonight? I have a feeling her version of events will be far more factual. The trap had sprung. He was caught, and the realization was dawning in his terrified eyes. "Serena, listen to me," he pleaded, grabbing my arm with a pressure that was just shy of painful. "You don't understand. Isabella is dangerous. She's unstable." I looked down at his hand on my arm with a gaze that had made corporate titans blanch. "Remove your hand. Now." He released me instantly. "She's been stalking me, harassing me. She's obsessed because I left her for someone better." "Someone better?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my daughter, whom you plan to rob blind?" "That's not. I love Chloe. I really do. This isn't about money." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of the lie almost made me laugh again. "Julian, 20 minutes ago you demanded a $3 million house, or you would destroy my family with false accusations. Which part of that is supposed to demonstrate your love?" Across the room, Chloe laughed at something a bridesmaid said, radiant and blissfully unaware. My heart ached for the pain to come, but it was a necessary surgery to remove a cancerous growth. He shifted tactics, his voice becoming wheedling. "Look, maybe I came on too strong with the house. I was nervous, wanting to provide for Chloe. We can work something out that's more reasonable." "Oh, we're definitely going to work something out," I agreed. "In fact, why don't we call Chloe over right now? I'm sure she'd love to hear your thoughts on what's reasonable." Panic flashed across his face. "No, not yet. Let me explain." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it. For the first time, he looked less than perfect. "Isabella and I had a business. Import-export. It went south. She blames me." "Import-export," I repeated flatly. "How entrepreneurial. And what exactly did you import and export? Stolen artwork, perhaps? Or were the collectibles forgeries from a Newark warehouse?" The blood drained from his face once more. He was utterly speechless. "Oh yes," I continued pleasantly. "Lucas Gray is exceptionally thorough. The FBI has quite a file on Rossi art acquisitions. Wire fraud, money laundering, trafficking in stolen property. Fascinating reading." His mask shattered completely, revealing the cold, calculating man beneath. "If you know all that, then you know what Isabella is capable of. She's not here to help you. She's here to destroy us both. Is she? Or is she here to retrieve the $480,000 you stole from her before you abandoned her to a federal investigation?" I let that sink in. She told me everything, Julian. Every con, every family, every life you've ruined for profit. I watched him process the totality of his exposure. This was no longer a simple blackmail. It was the implosion of his entire criminal enterprise. "What do you want?" he finally whispered, defeated. "I want you to stay right here," I said, my smile cold. "I'm going to collect my daughter and her new husband for a little family meeting." I left him standing there, a statue of panic, and crossed the ballroom. I caught Isabella's eye and gave a slight nod. She excused herself gracefully and began moving toward the private library I had reserved. It was time for the main event. Chloe was glowing as I approached, her face flushed with happiness. "Mom, isn't this the most perfect night?" she gushed. "It's certainly unforgettable, sweetheart," I said, my heart breaking. "Could I borrow you and Julian for a moment? There's something we need to discuss." Her smile faltered slightly with concern, but she followed me. Julian joined us, his face a mask of forced calm that wouldn't have fooled a child. Inside the book-lined library, the air was thick with tension. "Mom, what's going on?" Chloe asked, her eyes darting between us. "You're both acting so strange." Before I could answer, the door opened and Isabella stepped inside. Her demeanor had shifted from pleasant guest to cool professional. "Sorry I'm late," she said smoothly. I was enjoying the champagne. "Beautiful wedding, Chloe. You look exquisite." "Thank you," Chloe said, bewildered. "I don't believe we've met." "No, we haven't. I'm Isabella Rossi." She turned her gaze to Julian, who had gone rigid. "I believe you know my husband." The words detonated in the quiet room. Chloe's smile vanished. I don't understand." "Julian, what is she talking about?" "This woman is disturbed," Julian blurted out, his voice strained. "She's been stalking me, making crazy claims." "Crazy claims?" Isabella's laugh was sharp. "Julian, darling, shall we do this in front of your new wife?" She opened her clutch and withdrew a slim folder. She laid the documents on the desk one by one. A marriage certificate, joint tax returns, bank statements. "Should I continue?" Chloe stumbled back from Julian, as if he were contagious. "You're married?" "Not just married," I said gently, placing a steadying hand on her back. "They've been running a sophisticated con operation for years. Julian seduces the daughters of wealthy families, and Isabella researches the finances. Tonight was when Julian was supposed to pressure me for the beach house. That's insane. Julian protested, but the fight was draining from him. Is it? I opened my own folder, provided by Lucas. Would you like me to read the highlights? Or would you prefer to tell Chloe about the senator's daughter? Or the widow in Connecticut, whose entire retirement fund you emptied? Chloe had gone deathly pale, her hand pressed to her mouth. This can't be real. Tell me this isn't real, Julian. He looked at her, and for a fleeting second, I saw something that might have been genuine regret. Chloe, I can explain. It's not what it sounds like. It's exactly what it sounds like, Isabella stated flatly. You left me hanging, Julian. You took everything, and thought you could start over without me. The FBI was closing in, he snapped, his composure cracking. You wanted to run, I wanted to fight. You wanted to be greedy, she shot back. You thought you could steal our entire life and disappear. Chloe made a small, wounded sound. Oh, God. She looked at Julian, her eyes wide with horror. You were going to steal from us? From my mother? Julian's face hardened, the mercenary emerging fully. Your mother has $40 million, Chloe. The beach house is just a house. She'd never even miss it. The casual cruelty of the admission was the final blow. Chloe doubled over as if punched. You never loved me, she whispered, the words fractured. It was all a lie. She stood on shaky legs, the layers of her wedding gown rustling. I need to get out of here. She pushed past him and fled the room, her bridesmaids rushing after her. In the heavy silence that followed, I looked at the two conspirators now turned against each other. Enough, I said, my voice low and commanding. You are both responsible for this, and you are both going to help me fix it. I laid out my terms with the precision of a CEO. They would provide a public narrative of cold feet, a tragedy of poor timing, not criminal intent. Julian would play the remorseful man who realized he wasn't ready for marriage. Isabella would be the concerned old friend who had tried to warn him. In exchange, I would not press extortion charges for the beach house incident, and I would ensure the federal investigation focused on their past crimes, keeping Chloe's name out of it. For Isabella, I presented the cashier's check for $700,000. They were cornered, and they knew it. With great reluctance, they agreed. The announcement to the guests was a masterful performance. Julian, pale and convincingly contrite, spoke of his sudden, paralyzing doubts. Isabella played her part with Oscar-worthy concern. And Chloe, my strong, incredible daughter, returned to the ballroom, her spine straight, and addressed our friends and family with a grace that made my heart swell with pride. She thanked them for coming, encouraged them to enjoy the party, and handle the humiliating situation with a dignity that Julian would never possess. Later, on the terrace, under a canopy of stars, she asked me the hard questions. Was any of it real? I think he convinced himself it was in his way, I said carefully. But his actions are the only truth that matters. She nodded, tears finally falling. Then her expression hardened. What happens to him now? And so, I told her the rest of my plan. The check to Isabella was both payment and a trap, linking her directly to the crime. Lucas had already located the money Julian had stolen, and the FBI was ready to move. Their arrests the next morning were swift and clinical. From a surveillance van, Chloe and I watched as Julian and Isabella were taken into custody, their partnership ending in handcuffs in separate police cars. In the months that followed, Julian Rossi was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Isabella, having cooperated fully, received 3. Their assets were seized, and restitution was begun for their previous victims. The experience changed us all. Chloe, after a period of healing, found love with a kind, unassuming architect who had no interest in her trust fund, only her heart. And I discovered a new purpose. My partnership with Lucas Gray evolved. We began working pro bono with a victim advocacy group, using my resources and his expertise to protect other families from predators like Julian. I am Serena Thorne. At 52, I learned that the best revenge is not just served cold. It is meticulously planned, perfectly executed, and ultimately used as a foundation to build something better. I had protected my daughter, and in doing so, I had found a new strength within myself. The future, once a landscape of quiet grief, now stretched before me, full of purpose and the promise of new battles worth fighting. Some stories end with a wedding. Ours began with one.